This is the DRF Players Podcast. Here are your hosts, Peter Thomas Fornatel and Jonathan Kinchin.
Hello and welcome to the DRF Players Podcast. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatel, back with you, back from the United Kingdom, and a very fun couple of weeks. Back from the UK, had a lot of fun in Cheltenham last week, or 2 weeks ago, in London last week, and now back not in the Brooklyn bunker, but in my childhood home, actually, on the North Shore of Long Island, and in my father's old office. I always enjoy doing shows from here. Feel a little special inspiration from the years of rock and roll music planning that went on in this space. But we're not here to talk about rock and roll. Going to be joined in a minute or two by my usual co-host. Was wondering where he was. He was apparently running a little bit late today. Producer Craig suggested maybe he fell asleep again, but I don't think that's the case. We'll have him make an explanation for himself when he arrives within minutes. We're going to be going over stakes racing from the weekend. Mainly that took place at the fairgrounds. Of course, Louisiana Derby Day. Some news about the Triple Crown Trail, and some looking ahead to the Kentucky Derby as well. We got a few questions to come in. Always love to throw out there that folks who have questions, feel free to hit us up. You can find me on Twitter at LoomsBoldly, or you can hit us up at the podcast email address. We've had some very good questions come in through there recently. That one is simply podcast@drf.com. Want to just put your attention on a few things coming up. Keep an eye out. You'll see marquees on the drf.com website. I'm fortunate to be participating in a number of these handicapping sessions where you can sign up and join us live or catch us subsequently at drf.com/YouTube. The first one's the one I'll tell you about today. The others will wait till they're a little bit closer. But the one happening this week, going to be joined by Marcus Hirsch, of course, international correspondent for DRF, who's been working over in Dubai already, and also Mark Milligan of Timeform, not Timeform US, but Timeform, who is their international racing expert. And we're going to be going over the races for the Dubai World Cup card. I'm sure we'll be talking about them on the regular show as well, but we'll have an opportunity to get some even deeper insight. That's going to be taking place on Friday. I'm all of a sudden forgetting what time it is. No, it's 10 a.m. So I'll have 2 hours of broadcasting on Friday from 10 to 11 with Marcus and Mark, and then JK and I will take the reins with the usual podcast situation, 11 to 12. The podcast, as some of you know, because you're listening as I'm speaking, and some of you might not know, you can join us live. You can typically find the link on live.drf.com, or you can sign up via Spreaker. That's Spreaker.com, like speaker, but throw an R in there, and search for DRF Players Podcast. You can get an email from them anytime we go live and check out the live shows that way. And then, of course, as I'm sure you all know, you can sign up and get the shows downloaded automatically wherever you get your podcasts. iTunes, I always recommend. SoundCloud, we've had great response from SoundCloud from the early days. Those would be the two main ones. And then you can also download with a direct link from drf.com. So with that reminder given, I would like to bring in my co-host. He may have overslept. He may have gotten stuck in traffic. We'll hear his excuse soon enough. He's the people's champion, Jonathan Kinchin. JK, what's up?
What's going on? Yeah, no, I seriously, what happened was I have decided that I've always heard that the camera adds 10 pounds, and if we're going to be TVing here in the next
trouble for both of us, man.
If we're going to be TVing here in the next 55 days, I gotta whip it into shape. I ate too much ice cream, enjoyed too many adult beverages, and crushed too many French fries to not start doing a little bit more physical activity, and it just messed up my schedule, and I was off.
What's the regime? You strike me as a crash diet guy, first of all.
No.
No, that's not you?
No, I'll go like low carb situations, not like anything crazy. I've done a couple like 21-day sugar detoxes, which I've never felt.
That's what I'm talking about.
I've never felt felt better in my life when I do them, but nothing like gimmicky. It's just like eliminating that type of stuff from your diet. And I felt, like I said, I never felt better. And then you realize that you don't really need it, and you actually feel bad when you eat it. It almost is like a lifestyle change temporarily, and then you slowly kind of fall back into it after. It took me like a year to have a sandwich again, really, the first time I did it. But anyways, long story short, I had a score this summer at Del Mar, and one of the things that I did with some of that money is I bought like a rowing machine.
Oh, cool.
That and so
picture of Mike Smith, famously a picture of Mike Smith, and a rowing machine.
Yeah, actually the same weekend.
Did that story make it on the best of? I sure hope so. So I could just send folks back to the best of DRF Players Podcast 2017 to hear about JK's Del Mar score. I won't make you retell it. All right, so you bought the rowing machine. Has it been unwrapped up till now?
Yeah. No, I was using it for a little while, and then I got a bad knee. My knee started hurting, so I kind of slowed down. Then I started eating pizza again, and so now I'm reeling it in. I'm reeling it in for the next, we got 54 days until the Santa Anita Preakness contest with the World Horse Players Tour. So I will try to bring sexy back at some time between now and then.
You and JK and JT getting on the bringing sexy back train. Yeah, that's actually a really excellent point. I could, couldn't you just see a world, JK, where we film this pilot, it's a great hit, the show's fantastic, and we show it to a network executive, and they say, this is absolutely great, let's greenlight it for 5 seasons, but ditch the fat guys.
Oh, it could definitely happen. That's what I'm worried about. So, we'll have to get it in order.
I got some good training advice recently from my friend, contest player Frank Sorensen. I'm looking to put that into effect. I will hopefully be there with you at least 10 pounds lighter than I am now. Let me tell you, going to England for a couple of weeks and, drinking all the beer and eating all the English breakfast, probably not helping me in this cause. But I'm back in the USA. It's time to get into a good fitness regime, and that'll hopefully start this week. I'm heading back to Brooklyn this afternoon.
Quick question. Why do they have beans, like pinto beans, with English breakfast?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer. I guarantee you some food nut has written a whole thing about the evolution of the baked bean thing. If I were to guess, perhaps it goes back to rationing and canned foods and this and that. But I'll say I love it. I'm a big fan of the beans on toast with your eggs and sausage and rashers in the morning. But I'll do some research. I bet you somebody's written an article. Mexican cuisine, you'll see beans with breakfast. They're not unique in the world, but it does seem like the kind of thing that there's a story behind. As a Texan, do you not approve?
Well, I mean, refried beans is fine with some like huevos rancheros or something like that, but jeepers, and then they don't have their bacon's not normal. I don't really know what's going on.
We learned that you're seeing more USA-style bacon. We learned this when we were over there in 15, but it's got a different name. It's streaky bacon. Our bacon is streaky bacon, and then they have they're more like what I call rashers. I don't know if they call them rashers or if they just call it bacon or what. But anyway, it's a great way to start the day, but after doing it 10 days in a row, it's probably enough. Because it's not like I then eat less throughout the rest of the day when I have that tremendous feed in the morning. But anyway, enough of that. Let's get on to some horse racing, JK. A couple of Kentucky Derby prep races over the weekend. I'm going to start you off with a curveball. I don't even know if you saw the race, but I spilled so many words about it that I feel like I need to at least give it a quick mention. Did you happen to watch the Sunland Derby on Sunday?
I didn't. I was in full travel mode, so I didn't even watch it. It wasn't a part of the menu on DRF tournaments. I anticipated it would, and that's where I was active for the day, and so there wasn't even any reason to re-dive into that situation.
Gotcha. I don't think you missed anything you really need to worry about in terms of Triple Crown possibilities. Runaway Ghost, who I guess won. It's amazing that I'm not remembering now. I think he'd won the local horse. Won pretty easily in the end. Had a 4-length lead in the stretch. Ended up holding on to win by 2 3/4. Bet more than I would have thought from that outside post. not going to get in a situation where he wasn't going to get the lead. Just a shade under 4-1. The Beyer speed figure came back 85. I don't know that, last year we had Hentz win this race, who attracted some, wise guy and semi-wise guy attention for the Derby. Not sure we're going to hear any of the same type of chatter coming out of this one. You correctly predicted that Peace would go off among the favorites based on that form line to Bolt Doro and McKenzie. Didn't run awfully, was third, but still beaten 8 3/4. That didn't do anything to boost the form of those two, I wouldn't say, with the running that kind of figure in that kind of spot. When some of these horses, I won't make you comment on a race you didn't see, but when you get an opportunity to watch this race as some of these horses come back subsequently, feel free to chime in on the Sunland Derby.
Yeah, no, I will say this though. I mean, looking through the charts quickly, the 10th race before that, which was the New Mexico State University handicap, the 10-horse one. The 11 and then the 10 were the running. We talked about the outside kind of being promising when I was being a degenerate earlier in the week. So, maybe the track did play that way. I noticed Fabian won on the undercard. She's always been a filly that I've always thought highly of. The sprinter for Bob Baffert. She won a stake race there, picked up what I would amount to some easy chips to equate it to a poker situation. And I'm sure we'll see her name a lot more throughout the rest of the year.
I like that, and it is true. You see, and when you look at the odds, too, you had Dream Baby Dream from the 10 post, 16-1, 7 Trumpets from the 8 post, 13-1. And then you look at some of the disappointments of the race from the rail, 7-1 all-out blitz, finishing nowhere. New York Central, who was pretty well fancied at 5.5-1, breaking from the 2 finishes, or from the 3 finishes nowhere. There is a very superficial case to be made without having done any of the real work on it. Somebody who's devoted and interested in bias should probably take a look at this whole card, I would say, and see if that bears out upon further scrutiny. But meanwhile, let's move to the other Derby prep race from the weekend. It happened at the fairgrounds. It was the Louisiana Derby, and Winstar and Pletcher get it done with Noble Indy, who comes back with a 95 Beyer speed figure, 115 on time form, which raw, which is exactly equivalent in my reckoning to that 95. And then on the time form U.S. methodology, that got upgraded to a 118 because Noble Indy was near that pace, which was coded red to the half. What did you think of Noble Indy and the rest of the runners in this year's Louisiana Derby?
Well, I mean, it's just one of those weirdly run races, right? And I mean, I think it's important to note that it is the first time that not the first time, I'm sure some of them maybe have run in the Rimson or something like that, but the first time this year is a 3-year-old and these big grade 1 preps are, I guess this is a grade 2 now. I didn't know they changed Louisiana Derby to a grade 2. That's kind of sad. Mile and an eighth races. Matt Bernier made a point on Twitter last week at some point, noticing that those large, those final round Derby points system races the winners of those races are who produce the winners of the Derby. And I pointed out that more than it being so much the points or the race's prestige or the time of the year that it happens, I think it's more that it's the 9 furlongs. It's the separator. At least it starts to become a separator from that bridge from 1 1/16 to 1 1/4. And that's kind of what I noticed watching the race back. I don't think Noble Indy was overly impressive, but the horse was forward, well bred, obviously. Take charge Indy out of a storm boot mare. So those are all things that I felt like, when you watch the race, he just kind of kept extending. It looked like he was dead at the quarter pole, and like he was going to get run by 3 horses, and those horses just kind of leveled off. And then Noble Indy just kind of kept clicking away. And it was a great ride by Johnny to put the horse in the race, although they were going a pretty nice clip. My boy Jack kind of confirms what we thought about Oaklawn on the day, right? The inside was definitely advantageous. He had the pace that he needed to close into in this situation. Was wide, but really no excuse, in my opinion. He had dead aim on the winner.
Didn't run badly, ends up third, beaten just under a length. But But yeah, you do see the second and third there both coming from far back. Part of the reason why on the time form figures Noble Indy got that upgrade. Was there anything else you noticed in there that you were excited about out of the race?
No, not really. I mean, I didn't think it was a particularly strong race to start with. And a lot of times when you're looking at a race and you can't really formulate a strong opinion, at least for me, it typically leads you to think that the quality might be there, because I'm easy to fall in love with a likely winner or a whatever, and I just didn't. I wasn't really moved by the horses that showed up for this one, and I don't see myself betting too many of these moving forward. I would think that Noble Indy is just probably the fourth or fifth best pletcher.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's possible. I did see a little bit of room for improvement potentially for Noble Indy. Had a little bit of contact coming out of the gate, which maybe lit him up and maybe took a little bit of the starch out of the finish. And anytime you see those upgrades, in terms of pace, you can sometimes figure with a little bit more of an even run, they could run faster. But he'd have to run a lot faster. I'm not talking about for the Triple Crown races necessarily, but it seems like one who could keep developing into the type of horse we'll see in various other derbies through the year. Of the ones in there, he was the one that I thought was the one. No.
I think I seem underwhelmed, at least the last few weeks, by these races, but I think the big stuff starts to pick up now. I think this is where I've tried to teach myself to reserve my love affairs for that these mile and an eighth races. And I would expect this Saturday there's probably a performance that will get me kind of excited, whether it's a performance in victory or in defeat. And then also, coming up the next weekend with what we're going to see at the Santa Anita Derby and then also the Bluegrass and the Arkansas Derby. I read somewhere that Good Magic's next start is going to be in the Bluegrass. So that'll be interesting to see what he does off of that performance that I think invoked a lot of conversation down in Florida last time.
Yeah, I don't feel much better about that race now than I did then. But he's the kind of horse that I think goes to your theory of I'll be against him the next time in all likelihood, but it wouldn't take much to win me back going forward if it turns out I'm wrong and the old horse is still there. Is that sort of where you are with Good Magic?
Yeah, I mean, if he runs well, but he can't just win the race and get a 98 buyer. I'm going to want to, he's going to have to, kind of wow me to get me back on board. And he's also one that I think I would rather him get a weird trip into a slow pace or something and run second, train well leading up to the Derby, and then try to grab some, garner some enthusiasm going in that direction. But I'm always that's just the better in me, looking for a good opportunity for some value to be created on a horse that, that is in capable hands and capably bred. So we'll see what happens.
It's interesting to note that he doesn't necessarily even have to qualify for the Derby. He's got 20 points. I think it's going to take 30. So, I mean, he's in a very good shot to have a top 3 finish there and get it done. But you could see some sort of really nice run, shows he's a horse, horror trip, run 4th situation at Keeneland that could still leave him on the outside looking in. I predict if that happens, they'd relook at the whole, excuse me, I'm very phlegmy today. Hang on one second. All right, I think we're dealing with it now. That happened to me on air the other night, by the way, live TV. It's bad enough on a podcast to do that to you people. But I was doing the At the Races stateside coverage, and I was never, I don't think in my life, in a position where I had to cough and was trying to make myself not cough. Have you ever been in that position?
A few times.
You know what happens?
You spit?
I didn't spit, but it was just, I ended up coughing really bad. And
like a spit take?
Changing color and having tears in my eyes, and it was, I felt bad for Haley Moore, who was hosting. Fortunately, the camera wasn't on, so she was able to give me her most empathetic look. And it was not good, my friend, not good. At least here I have the mute button to take care of most of it, but when I'm mid-sentence, it's kind of hard. Apologies to the listeners.
No, and then one more thing. I think you said Good Magic had 20 points. I looked at the leaderboard just now. It looks like 34 points.
Did he have? Were there points races before that? Then he's in.
He's 11th right now. So
because of the champagne. The champagne would have points.
Yeah, and then the Breeders' Cup Juvenile also.
Well, yeah, no, that was the 20 I thought he had.
Oh,
and
okay.
Then
didn't he get points for running? Yeah.
He gets points for running third. You're right, 34 points. He won't miss the gate. Never mind.
Yeah.
You know, if we were a different type of podcast, we'd edit that whole thing out. I was just trying to see a world where, and a world could exist under the new point system where winning the juvenile wasn't enough to get you into the gate for the Derby. Yes. Is that right?
Winning the juvenile, how many points is the juvenile?
20. No, I know.
Yeah, I mean, strike power
I know I'm correct in what I'm saying. I'm asking you, should the system be that way?
Oh, I got what you're saying. Yes. Yeah, I mean, you should at least hit the board in a race as a 3-year-old moving forward, you know? I mean, obviously the star power of having that horse in the gate is always exciting. I know for the breeding industry, it's probably exciting. You want to kind of create a star, but they got to. I mean, if you can't hit the board as a 3-year-old when you're the champion 2-year-old, you probably don't need to be running on the first Saturday of May.
I could just spin a yarn where what I thought could have happened, I was incorrect because of the champagne and whatnot, but I could spin a yarn where you had a juvenile winner win, have a Bolt Doro setback early in the year, come back slower, and be on the outside looking in. I almost wonder if that, of all the races run, I almost wonder if the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, like the final preps, should almost be winning you're in. I mean, I see your point, but when you factor in injury and the way that horses are being trained now with fewer and fewer preps, especially ones who have the established form as 2-year-olds, I wonder if that isn't something that at some point will get looked at.
Well, it'd be neat. It'd be neat for a couple of reasons. I think it would be cool to see how certain trainers might not feel the stress of getting those extra points and some of the decisions they might make moving forward. I mean, they could maybe potentially give the horse more time off, take it a little bit easier on the horse, allow the horse to kind of develop and fill in without kind of banging on them, getting them ready for those earlier preps. And there's a lot of things I think you could probably do differently if that was a win and you're in.
We're seeing that happen anyway, even with horses who aren't necessarily in. And I might give away a bingo square here. I'm having just a terrible brain freeze. I'll see if I can come up with it. Catholic Boy comes to mind as a horse who's skipped a prep, and then this is just so bad. This is a really easy one. The Fountain of Youth winner. Oh boy, can you help me out, or am I?
You've got me
just give me a second. We're giving away bingo squares like nobody's business here today, and that's okay. Lots of the mistake jar is clinking along. Well, let's return to that thought. Meanwhile, I do want to talk about some other news that comes as a surprise to no one, I think, that Justify sounds like he is being pointed to the Arkansas Derby. Exciting news for me because I'll get a chance to be there in person, it sounds like. And working well, looking good. I tried when I was over there to make the bet that I said I was going to make. And I won't name names, but I had a disappointing experience with a bookmaker who had a price online, and I went in the shop and I just caught the world's it was not a scam. It was just a guy who was clueless, who was like, "Oh no, we're not taking bets for that yet. You got to come back closer to the day." So I wasn't actually able to get down at the 16 price, and then within days it was 14, and now the last place that I tried to go to get a bet down, it was 12. And I'm just feeling too chiseled to bother, and I'm feeling somewhat resentful that I didn't get down at the 16-1 because I'm thinking that's going to end up being. I'm feeling much better about that as a pretty darn good bet. Where are you with Justify, and him going to Arkansas? I think clarifies that the talk of sending McKenzie out of town was more just a fit of pique brought on by the questionable steward's decision last time. Any surprises in the decisions made by your close personal friend Bob Baffert? And what do you think? What do you think of those two going forward?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I saw XBTV posted a video yesterday of like him working, and it said on Twitter, and it said like Justify, who is quickly emerging as one of the favorites for the Kentucky Derby, and then like I think our friend Marcus Hirsch like commented like, well, let him win a stakes race first. Well, I mean, that's fine, right? Okay, but the horse is like, it's not like he's winning races and like we're anointing him the Derby winner. He's running really fast races geared down. And yes, who are you running against is important, but the clock tells a story. It's why buyer speed figures and speed figures are so important in our game. And this horse is running triple-digit buyers, and he's trained by one of the best dirt trainers in the world, if not the best dirt trainer in the world. The idea that people are calling him emerging as one of the favorites, I think is completely accurate. And I understand that like Luch is excited about his horse Machisimo or whatever, but he gets on and like makes a comment about Justify too, and it's like, I mean, I don't even know if Machisimo's running. I don't even know if he's run a triple digit figure yet. I mean, I don't think he has. I don't know. I mean, I get it. I mean, I'm not saying that Machisimo's not a nice horse. I'm just saying that like I don't see why everyone's rushing to somehow downgrade the excitement and potential that Justify has. No one's anointing him the Derby winner.
No, he's clearly one of the four favorites for the Kentucky Derby, though. I mean, like, that's just a fact.
He's going to be favored in the Rebel no matter. I don't care who shows up.
There's a mistake jar for you.
I'm sorry, not the Rebel. The Arkansas Derby.
Meanwhile,
I'm going
to put like $30 in the mistake jar because not only did I get the horse, not only did I fail to come up with the horse immediately, wrong. But I got the race wrong too. It was
you meant the Holy Bull.
Holy Bull winner, Audible, who that was another example of a prominent horse skipping a prep and trainers sort of not worrying about the technically how many points they have today to get in, and just in my mind just putting the horse first and figuring the horse is going to tell them. And I guess they do risk that bad trip fourth, but I think that's just something when you have confidence in the horse and you want to make sure you're doing what's right by the horse. I mean, there's different methodologies. Some trainers are happy racing horses into shape. Some aren't. And when you look at the success rate that some of these trainers who kind of wrap the horses in cotton wool, I get it as fans. It's not what's fun as a fan. We'd love to see them run more, but I ain't going to tell them they're doing anything wrong.
No, especially not a guy like Todd or Bob or Chad or, these guys that know what they're doing. There's a lot of different ways to train a horse. I don't begin to know all of them, and so I trust those guys. They make good decisions, and so there's a reason why. There's a reason why they're doing it. If the horses, I try not to question it too much, unless it starts to appear that there's an issue that's kept them from doing that.
Oh, sure, but it seems like with Audible, this was the plan, since, the week after the race, maybe relating to how fast the horse ran.
Yeah, and Todd did this with Destin last year, didn't he? I mean, wasn't there a big break with Destin?
There was. He was. What was the specifics of that one? He went from
Tampa,
Tampa right to the actual Derby.
Yeah, and he and Destin, although it wasn't sexy, but what Destin ran, he was sixth in the Derby, but that was that really wide trip, and that was 2 years ago. Excuse me, but and he ran well enough and came back and lost a photo in the Belmont. So a photo that makes our friend Garrett Skiba very happy, by the way.
Was that the original Belmont betting challenge that Garrett took down as one of his six six-figure scores in tournaments? An amazing mark, really, when you consider it. But yeah, you're absolutely right. We've seen it have. It doesn't seem to have a deleterious effect on the horse going forward from what we've seen. And Pletcher, obviously, it's Do you think we're done hearing tales of his Derby record after getting another winner last year?
I would think so. I mean, some wise guy will still say that he's 2 for 48 or something crazy like that. But whatever. You toss Todd because of his record at your own peril. I'd rather not do so.
I thought the best point that was made about that, and I can't remember who made it on the show. Maybe it was you, but now I can't remember who it was. The point was basically how many of those starters were ones that, were in there because he really thought they belonged, as opposed to taking a shot or however you want to phrase different versions of owner pick the spot, more or less. And,
yeah, I mean, he gets them there. I tell you that much. If there's no question about that. If you have a group of 10 2-year-olds and you want one of them in the gate for the Kentucky Derby, I think that the odds-on favorite to get that job done for you would be to send all 10 to either Todd or Bob, and you'll get one in the gate. If you got 10 nice, expensive 2-year-olds, and you want your best chance of getting one of them there, that's what I would do. That's where I would go with it.
I'm not sure it's a business model I would suggest for success in life, but I think that facts
of course
what you're saying are definitely true.
Yeah, no, of course not. I have, we talked about this before. It's one of my it's a fun conversation to have when you're sitting around with friends talking racing, is if you had $1 million dirt colt, only one, $1 million yearling, and as a 2-year-old, who would you send that horse to? And it's always a fun game to play, and it's fun because a lot of people will say, probably Bob, or maybe Todd, or or Chad, or whatever. Then you get like the kind of the obscure ones that people don't think of,
Well, maybe I'm too contrarian, but when asked that question, I always try to think of somebody who has, maybe say it this way, the institutional knowledge from one of those operations, but where I could be the big horse.
Yeah, no.
I feel like in those big operations, obviously they do a great job. And if I did have the 10 horses, I think that would probably be the logical thing to do. But having one horse, and you could find get him in the hands of, I'm just going to throw out some names, a George Weaver, a Brad Cox. I don't know, who are some other names that pop in your mind with that?
He's obviously Mike Maker.
That's interesting.
Is a guy that I would consider. I mean, don't get me wrong, he hasn't shocked the world really on dirt, but he's a good trainer. And when it comes to getting a horse with a good base that can stretch out, I mean, he's definitely one that can get that job done. I still think Dale does a good job. Romans, he's a little bit of a bigger. He might be too big for this conversation of underappreciated, but he's not he's not, he doesn't get the recognition that Todd and Bob get.
With Dale, just don't tell him you want to evaluate horses off their speed figures, or the relationship's going to get off to a rocky start, I predict.
Deal.
I do love the guy, but yeah, some interesting ideas that are different. But that's one of the cool things about the relationship between horsemen and horse players, and people who bet, and people who are have spent their lives in this game and know more in many senses much more about horses than we do. I still think there's ample opportunities to learn from each other. Any other names you want to throw out there?
I will say, yeah. I mean, I think that he's popping in my head, and it's an interesting dynamic, right? Because Rudolph Brissett, I know I don't really know him that well personally, but obviously the Prince of Keeneland, Jake Ballas, knows him really well, and I think it's just an interesting idea. He worked for Mott for a long time, and Mott's not exactly the guy that just has him cranked and ready to rock and roll as young horses. He takes more of his time. But Rudy learned all of these things from Mott, and now Rudy's out on his own, and he's winning with a bunch of young horses. He has the horse Quip, the China Horse Club WinStar horse that won at Tampa. He has a filly that won impressively with I think a 90-something buyer Sunday at Fairgrounds. So it's like if you find someone who takes all of those kind of slow, patient traits from a trainer and then can apply those methodologies with something a little bit more, with a more of like a precocious type of program, you can really get some good results out of that. So I mean, I think
really
there's a lot of capable people out there.
Oh, God, yeah.
I've always felt that way though. Like, you know, even in football, in like coaching, you'll see guys that come from a defensive pedigree, and they're better, but you know, they're more of an offensively driven guy. They are more well-rounded coach going to that next stage of their life when they have that base of knowledge of a defensive-minded situation. However, their natural talent is offensive. I think that the same thing can be said in when it comes to training horses.
I like it. I feel like we'd be remiss without giving a shout-out to Jonathan Thomas talking about institutional knowledge, somebody who worked with Romans, worked with Pletcher, worked with Clement, and obviously has arrived on the big stage and had some nice early success. We haven't punished him yet by making him be a guest on the show, but it's really only a matter of time, I think. And I also like to see these bigger operations giving trainers like these last couple we've discussed a shot. I think that's fantastic to see them getting supported by these industry stalwarts.
Well, yeah, because we've talked about it before. It's problematic, right? It's like the Santa Anita Derby would be one of the best 3-year-old preps in the last 5 years if Bob Baffert didn't have all 3 of those horses. God bless him. I don't say that he doesn't deserve them or he doesn't need to have them or whatever, but there is something to be said about how interesting some of those races could be if the good horses were in different hands. You know, I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
We have McKenzie, Solomini, Bolt Doro, Justify, you know, all in one race at Santa Anita, and that would be cool. Instead, we'll see something a little bit different, but that's okay too, right? I mean,
it's okay, but you make a great point. As fans and as bettors, these big public stables are not good. You know, it's something a lot of people don't talk about, and I'm not saying it's like, you know, they have to be eradicated tomorrow or anything. I mean, I think the idea of putting some limitations on them potentially, or coming up with more races for the more, quote, you know, middle class of racing would make sense. But it definitely comes with a cost. And that's why I think I like so much seeing these major industry players, whether we're talking about Windstar China Horse Club or La Penta, reaching out to these other places to give some other names a shot.
Two things, and they're completely different, but I don't want to forget one of them. The first one is, and I'll say it, then if we need to come back to what I owe Good Samaritan an apology. He won.
We were going to talk about him. He's on the list.
And shout out to one of our favorite horses on the podcast, The Player. I heard it. I don't know. I feel bad not knowing exactly what happened. I just heard that he didn't finish the race.
No, I think it was bad.
Okay.
I'll let you look that up while I talk a little bit about the New Orleans and Good Samaritan, who ends up running a 99 Beyer speed figure in an impressive victory, gets a 119 on Timeform US with no coding. And I don't feel like I need to apologize so much as just appreciate that this horse really has the potential to be a major player. And, you know, I always talk about the Mott with a target thing, a potential bingo square for a future card. And when a horse like this wins a race like that I don't think was circled on the calendar, just gives me all the more reason to want to look at him going forward and figure he has reason to improve. Did you come up with the news there?
I did. It's surgery. So that surgery is a procedure that I prefer to other procedures that take place on the racetrack. So he Buff said, great news so far. Surgery went well. They put a plate in with 16 screws. Took over 7 hours to do the surgery. And so a wonderful job in a complicated surgery is what they say. So, I remember that one of my favorite things about him is our friend Travis Stone, being at Churchill, told us that he went by his stall one day. And he said he like sits like a dog, and he's like he's just a big old puppy. Like he like literally sits down like a dog. And so hopefully that kind of intelligence will help him through through the surgery, and hopefully he'll have a nice, healthy recovery. It seems like it's pretty significant that there won't be racing anymore for him, but that's not the important part. We just want to have him around.
Absolutely. And note to any thoroughbred horses out there listening, you want to get on JK's good side, eat a donut or sit like a dog.
Sit like a dog, eat a donut. So that was the first thought. The other thought that I want to say, and this is completely going backwards, but I just want to say this. What's today's date? Today's date is
March 27th. I think
March
I forgot that at the beginning of the show, by the way, when I was doing my vamping waiting for you. March 27th edition, show 321.
I think that this Justify is pretty stinking good, and I really, really think that he could be something special. And here's one of my favorite things about hanging out the racetrack with people that have been doing this for a lot longer than I have, and guys that have a much better and more well-rounded opinion of racing than I do, is Duke and Paul. I watched the race with them, and they were both extremely impressed by his last race. Just the fact that he went as fast as he did early in that race and still made that move that he made on the turn. And I always like to hear other people with, like I said, with more experience kind of gushing about a horse's performance. I think this horse is really, really good. And I think that if he can put it together in the Arkansas Derby and he gets the blessing of our friend John the Clocker, he could be my easy single come Derby day if we can get things going in the right direction.
High praise. Now, does this mean, I know you were planning already on the Sunday after the Arkansas Derby being in Keeneland to play in the Grade 1 Gamble. Boy, been a lot of furious activity qualifying for that contest on DRF tournaments the last couple of weekends. But is there a chance, are you high enough on this horse that you'd consider trying to do the double, JK, get to Oaklawn and the 10-strike party on the Saturday and then head to Keeneland on Sunday, or is that too much travel even for your peripatetic soul?
No, it's not too much travel because I'm doing something similar to that. I coached a young man my last couple of years coaching, and he is getting married in Houston on that Saturday.
Oh, funny.
So I'm flying out Sunday morning to make first post for the contest on Sunday, but it's I don't you've met him. It's Schramm, the young. He's been to the Derby with us like 4 times. Yeah, yes. Young cat. Yeah, great kid. Yeah, he's getting married, so I couldn't miss his wedding, so I'm going to do that. Now look, if the Arkansas Derby, I don't care if the Arkansas Derby runs like when they say here comes the bride, like I'm going to be sitting down watching the race.
Now, JK, I'm surprised at you and this clear failure of leadership of teacherdom on your part. You didn't get it through these kids' heads that they can get married and die, just not on Triple Crown days, major Triple Crown prep days, or Breeders' Cup days. You didn't get that lesson imparted.
I tried to coach him up, but they were actually in Vegas this weekend for his bachelor party, so I was sending them. I was screenshotting my contest runs and just sending it to them so they could bet. So I'm proud to say they contributed to the parimutuel pools this weekend. A big group of young guys that were having a good time in Vegas. So they went up and they made 10. They did it as a group. They went up and they made 10 $100 win bets on my tournament run for the day.
How'd they do? What was the situation?
They won. It wasn't much. They won. I think they bet 1,000. I think they got back like 1,800 or something.
Dude, that's great. Action all day, and you almost double your money. I mean, compared to what one could expect just gambling, I think that's hopefully
absolutely.
That's enough to get them some free drinks.
Well, that was my story. I said, hey, did you guys get some drink tickets? And they're like, Coach, no, we didn't get any. I was like, dude, go back up there, show the guy the tickets, and tell him, say, look, man, I bet $1,000. Can I get 10 drink tickets? Yeah. And I said, and if the guy says anything, you look him dead in his eye. He's at the Cosmo. You look him dead in his eye and you say, you know what? I think we're going to take our action down to the wind. Johnny Avello wouldn't do this to us.
Oh, that's great. Did it work?
No, he gave him drink tickets, so they didn't have to. They didn't have to just say that
card.
No, that'd have been great.
To get them, our buddies at the South Point too. I mean, let's not forget they'll take care of horse players out at the South Point or like you mentioned, the Win. It is funny. Just another example of how the world looks down on horse players, but in this case, it actually works to our advantage. it also has to do, I understand, with the fact that there are so many more races than there are games at a given slate. But it's funny when you see when a sports book will give rules about what they'll comp, how much less you can bet as a horse player to get the free stuff than as a sports bettor. And again, you can come up with logical reasons, but I always just like to think that it's because they assume we're a bunch of degenerates and you give us a couple drinks and we'll start, going to the ATM machine. Not that there's any truth in that in our case, but you know what I'm saying. We got 15 minutes left, tons of races to talk about, some listener questions to get to. Little sloppy show, but kind of a fun show today. Thank you all for joining us, whether you're doing so live or checking us out later through the usual podcast channels. We talked a bunch about old friends of the show. Let's get your take on Good Samaritan. I mentioned before, I assume you were listening as you were looking up that information. Does your opinion differ from mine at all? I mean, I just see him as one who should just keep moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, when it's like we talked about it earlier. Like when I mentioned Rudy Versett, if you get a horse on a comeback trail off of a long break, and the horse hasn't run since November 24th for Mott, and the horse wins like that, that horse can be reckoned with moving forward. So, look, he's got my attention. I'd imagine we'll see him quite a bit up at Saratoga, this summer. And I thought he was good. I mean, I'm still not convinced that he's like some world beater, but I think he's a good horse, and in the right situations, he can win some big races. So, it's interesting to me that as promising as he was on the turf as a 2-year-old, that he wouldn't find his way back there at some point. But like I said, I mean,
I think you nailed that last time when you were talking about when you mentioned the Yoshida situation, and it probably has to do with just what they believe the potential is and what the spots are. I haven't paid enough attention. I'm sure there's probably been reporting on DRF.com to this very question. But what that target race was that was circled on the calendar for Good Samaritan, I'm sure that'll all come.
It's kind of fun. Like, what do you think it is? Like, what would your guess be if you owned the horse and you had Good Samaritan? You know what he did at Saratoga this summer. Like, obviously, the Whitney would be your big target. Well, where are you going to go with him in the meantime?
Well, I mean, the first race that popped into head, and it sounds like it's probably too ambitious when you say it out loud, but I mean, do you take a look at the Met Mile?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, it feels like it's a tad sharp for a late-running horse whose best races have been at 1 mile and an 1/8. It seems a little sharp, but at the same time, like, sometimes
reward, though.
Right. No, I agree.
You run third in that race, and in terms of your future career, isn't that worth more than plenty of wins?
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I mean, that's the one that makes the most sense. Give him a try there. I mean, obviously the owners are attempting to create a stallion. I mean, that's what WinStar does with their horses, and so what better race than the Met Mile? And it's not damaging, right? If he doesn't run well in the Met Mile, then you give him a couple of weeks off, and then you start training him, up to the Whitney, or maybe get him a prep at Belmont in between then. I don't. That makes total sense to me. It just seems a little sharp.
I agree. Indeed, Marcus Hirsch has an article up right now on DRF.com. Multiple options for Good Samaritan. You can check that out. They're talking about, the Met is mentioned, the Stephen Foster is mentioned. Check out the whole article. You can see some direct quotes from Mott about the situation and go from there. So, all right, that's probably enough on that one. Let's stick with the fairgrounds.
Okay.
Do you have something else on that?
No. Let's stick to the fairgrounds. I wanted to talk about one at Gulfstream, but let's finish in New Orleans.
Yeah, we'll get there. A couple of races from Gulfstream if we have time. Let's talk about another old favorite of the show, good old Arklow, running second at a nice price, getting within a length and 3/4 of Synchrony. Synchrony wins with a 101 Beyer speed figure, 126 on the time form scale with no coding. What did this race make you think going forward for that big race on the Derby undercard, or any other thoughts you have on it?
Yeah, I mean, Arklow was better. I mean, he I think that
better than the winner or better than he'd been. What do you mean?
No, he's better than he'd been. He was better than I expected he would run, and obviously better than the public thought he would run at 11-1. I'll reserve judgment. We'll see what I think. Synchrony was really good. That horse is really nice, and so I think that horse could have could probably show up come around Derby Day. But let's see what happens with Arklow. I'm still not 100% convinced that he's probably like grade 1 older horse turf material, but he's definitely good enough. Sorry, Elliot.
It amazes me. You look at this horse's picture every day. You have for folks who don't know, after beating him/us out of the pick 6 on Derby Day last year, Elliot kindly sent a win picture to JK. Elliot, one of the Donegal owners who has a piece of Arklow. And JK, as sort of a reminder to himself of his own humility, important lesson for those in life. Sometimes it's good to show a little humility. And JK has this picture hung up, and he looks at it every day, and yet still has not been brainwashed into thinking this is the best horse in training.
It's funny, like every time I bet him a few times after that, he never ran well enough for me. So
maybe you've just given up, but it was a good run and a good run from Synchrony. And I would say this, sort of a tough post and not a smooth beginning for the one that we both tipped, right, in Luke Cullen. Not a horse I would cross off the list just yet.
No, obviously not. I mean, you're going to get that sometimes with those horses. We talk about them all the time that kind of give you that close into blue fractions. On time form, they often, more often than not, run into to trip issues because they're not tactical enough to avoid that. They're not tactical enough to always get to a position of saving ground, and so he's definitely one that I would look at moving forward in another spot.
Fairgrounds Oaks was won by Chocolate Martini. 88 Buyer speed figure, came back 107 on time form US. This was a race that was coded red to the half and 6 furlongs. What happened here, JK?
Yeah, it just looked like it just fell apart, huh? I mean, at least we were right about one thing, or is that I'm going to keep betting against Wonder Godot if they keep betting her. And they do bet her, don't they? Every single time.
This one surprised me. I thought the sort of word would – I thought everybody had seen what we had seen at this point.
Yeah. Chocolate Martini got a setup. I don't think that was the – I don't think that the Kentucky Oaks winner was in that race, and I don't think a horse that's going to hit the exacta was in that race. So, she ran well enough and good for her, but I have a hard time with horses that get setups like that.
Right. Typically you get that setup, particularly at that price, and then the next time around you say last time was the time. And I think that pretty much speaks for itself. You mentioned you wanted to talk about Gulfstream. I'm going to take a wild guess. The Hutchison is the race you wanted to discuss?
Yeah. Madison's Luna was impressive. I was wrong about the 2-horse Belle Tapisserie or whatever her name is, and she was 8-1 and wasn't really. Excuse me, he was 8-1 and wasn't really bet, and so that.
Did you say that because Madison is more associated as a female name? Is that why? Is that why you're putting that dollar in the mistake jar? I just wanted to check.
I think it's Madison, and I think it's Belle. I think it's both of them that threw me off.
Yeah, you're right. You're right, Belle. I know you're a huge Beauty and the Beast fan, so you have that association. So it's. But
Madison's Luna. I actually texted our friend Mike after the race that they keep winning races along the way. It's a tap it out of Terrace Tango, half to Terrace Tango, who was a grade 1 winner if I'm not mistaken. So that family is prominent enough that there could be something here with that horse. I mean, that horse was impressive. Drew
Very
off by 5, going 6 against these types of horses was definitely impressive. And so I'd imagine we'll see him. I don't know. Maybe he's the type we'll see in that Pat Day Mile on Derby Day, or maybe something before that. It seems like they could give a little time here and get ready for that one.
It was a small field, but there were some good horses in it. One tip-off that Belle Tapisserie, is that how you say it, was not maybe all he was cracked up to be, came in an earlier race on the card where the horse he beat had a name that amused the heck. This horse had a name that amused the
Zippy
heck
Willie.
out of the Brits. The Brits were dying. I had the IFB on for that, and they were the name. The puns were flying furiously about Zippy Willie, and Zippy Willie had disappointed in an earlier race where I had a very embarrassing moment. Fortunately, it wasn't on air, though I almost wish it were, just so I could cop to it, but I'll cop to it here. John Berry, the trainer, was one of the fellow guests on, and during the break, he was saying, I can't believe this Warfront McGahee colt is 10-1 here. Like, that just seems way overpriced for this horse's bloodlines in the barn. And I, in my arrogant American way, was like, well, these McGahees, they usually need a run. The market might be knowing something here, blah, blah, blah. Of course, Breaking the Rules goes ahead and wins very nicely at 8 or 10-1, depending on where you were betting. And the buyer came back pretty light at a 73, but the time form was better, a 99 time form U.S. figure for Breaking the Rules. And I just thought that typically with a lot of these McGahee runners, when they win first out, they're kind of doing it on their own because he does give them a race, and that this was maybe one just to keep half an eye on going forward as the year progresses, as a horse who could continue to develop. I mean, the speed figure the buyer certainly doesn't make you sit up and take notice, but I thought it was a classy performance. The horse looked awesome coming back, and just one I wanted to add to the list of horses to watch. Did you get a chance to see that race? Am I overselling it?
No, I missed it. I started off my JK's play of the day with a pick 3 with singling Zippy Willie. So sure, there's someone in the Twitter sphere that has 7 followers that wants to say something negative about that, but
did that actually happen, or are you just throwing that out there?
Oh no, that's happened. There's somebody who's trolling me like they troll Andy with my out of the gate plays of the day or whatever. And
you know what I always say, JK, you're nobody till somebody loads you, which must mean you're quite important.
Exactly. So everyone knows I'll pop off on Twitter, but then I realized the dude's got like 8 followers. I'm like, look, if I pop off, I'm pretty much like giving this dude an audience. So I ignore him, and he doesn't understand that you can't. He doesn't understand that you have to put a space between your sentence and @ or it doesn't actually tag me. So he'll say like, JK sucks at UT Big Hair. He doesn't hit space. I don't have the and there's no way he listens to the podcast and he can't figure that out. He must not be the sharpest tool in the shed, so I'm not going to point that out to him.
No, I definitely would not do that. But I now know exactly what I'm going to text you the next time we have a disagreement that I happen to win. I'm going to bust out the old JK sucks at no space.
Did you see that our friend Craig Bernick actually named a horse after or registered a name? He's going to name a horse after this guy and presumably a handful of others named Mom's Basement.
Oh, that's phenomenal. I saw you had another interaction with somebody who seemed like he was in the Mom's Basement crowd over the weekend, but we don't have time. We're just about out of time. We're going to save that because I do want to end on a serious note, and I want to very quickly touch on the Santa Monica, I think it was, where Selcourt galloped at 5-2, earning an impressive 103 buyer speed figure. Haven't checked the time for him yet on that one. Paradise Woods struggles home, broke in a bit and was bumped at the start, but you'd expect better than 4th at 4-5 for her. Where do you stand with Paradise Woods at this point, and how good was Selcourt?
Selcourt was very good. Paradise Woods has done this before. She did it down at Del Mar, where she came back and ran like a 70, 80 figure when she's been running hundreds. She might just be the type that needs to kind of get herself going a little bit, or maybe Mandela takes it easy with her. I wouldn't give up on her yet. I think she'll probably show up somewhere and do something impressive at some point.
She's the kind of horse you almost need to devise her own betting strategy for as a winner run-out type. Not a horse you're ever going to want to key at a short number, in my opinion, but the kind of horse that in certain situations when you have another horse you want to key, you want to do the old, I'm not sure if Mike Maloney talks about this in Betting with an Edge or if this is something I've just picked up from talking to Sean Borman about betting strategy over the last couple of years, where you play some combinations with a horse like Paradise Woods on top with your key horse in various places, and then play it a whole other way with Paradise Woods completely out. I just don't think at this point this is one you'd ever want to trust at a short number. Agree?
Yeah, she's just too inconsistent. That's not fair. She's not inconsistent. She's inconsistent, from a win standpoint. But if you look at her figures, I mean, she always goes out there and throws hundreds, except for the 2 times that she doesn't. You know.
But to me, 2 times where you're odds-on beaten is like what else? What else do you need to call inconsistent?
I also think she needs the lead, and I also don't think she's fast enough to get the lead going 7.
These are all good points. Well, we'll certainly be talking about her before her next start. And before off today, I know we're a little over time, but I want to just take a minute to acknowledge the passing of Jose Flores. This is such an awful story that came down last week. This is a guy who'd ridden 4,650 winners, tragically killed in a riding accident. Not somebody who was riding because he needed the money at that point, somebody who was riding because it's what he did and it's what he loved. And he loved the competition, and he leaves behind a wife and 3 kids, and just wanted to acknowledge that terrible moment and give props to him on his career, and just a reminder, and I know you wanted to say something about this too, JK, but a reminder that, you know, this is the only profession where you do your job and you're followed around by an ambulance.
Yeah, no, I think that a lot of times we're hard on these guys. They're making split decisions out there that can and this is proof that they can cost them their lives, and so as much as they're professionals and they can handle some criticism, I think we should just be careful how far we take it from time to time, just because they're out there risking their lives, and they have a lot more on the line than we do with our wagering dollars. Their lives are on the line, and I think that's something we should all keep in mind.
They literally give their lives for our sport. Something to think about for sure. All right, on that somber note, we're going to close out this edition of the DRF Players Podcast. I want to thank Jonathan Kinchin. I want to thank Willie Nile for providing our theme song, Travis Stone for his voiceover work, producers Craig and AJ. Most of all, I want to thank all of you for listening. You're what makes the show so fun to do. Thank you for tuning in live and or downloading, and feel free to hit us up with questions as we continue along the Triple Crown Trail. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatale. We will be back on Friday. May you win all your photos.